I dropped out of school to support my boyfriend, Sean Carter, through his PhD. Back then, I believed love meant sacrifice. I worked double shifts at a convenience store, delivered milk before dawn, and poured every penny I saved into his dreams, while mine gathered dust. He promised he'd take care of me once he succeeded. But when he finally graduated and landed a prestigious position, he cheated on me with one of his students and filed for divorce. The final betrayal came after I was injured in a car accident, left broken and discarded. That was the end of that life. But then I was reborn. I woke up back on the day I had decided to drop out of school. This time I wasn't going to make the same mistake. I walked straight into the principal's office and said firmly, "Sir, I'm not dropping out." He adjusted his glasses and studied me. "You're Emily Brown, right?" There was a pause, then a cold edge in his voice. "Fine. You can stay. But first, you'll need to pay the $1,890.49 in outstanding tuition and fees." He looked me up and down, taking in my faded school uniform, and added with a smirk, "When you aced the entrance exam, we thought we were bringing in a golden phoenix. Who would have guessed that in just 6 months, you'd plummet from first place to 500th? As the principal continued his lecture, my grandmother, Helen, burst into the room carrying a large woven sack. Without a word, she started shoving all my belongings into it. "If she's not going to school," she declared, "these can be sold to the recycling station." The principal smirked. "Mrs. Brown, that's not exactly the best way to phrase it." Then, turning back to me, he added, "Emily was in the top 10 for the entrance exam. We only waived the fees because of that." My grandmother shot back. "We waived the fees because she was supposed to get into a top university. Now she can barely qualify for a decent community college." Back in middle school, I had been at the top of my class. Top scores, perfect attendance. But high school was different. The curriculum was harder, and success required not just talent but time. While other students attended evening study sessions, I was working night shifts. While they went to early morning prep classes, I was out delivering milk in the freezing dark. Every dollar I saved, painstakingly earned, was stolen by my so-called brother, Jake, and spent on video games. As my grandmother and the principal argued, they completely ignored me. I finally grabbed the sack from her hands and shouted, "I'm not dropping out." Helen, who had just been scolding the principal, turned her fury on me. "What do you mean you're not dropping out? Your father just died. We have no income. Your brother still needs to go to school. What are you going to do? End up as unlucky as your dead mother?" Furious, I shot back, "Jake isn't even my real brother. You brought him here to maintain some imaginary family legacy. You don't even care if your own granddaughter goes to school." My voice was so loud it drew attention. Teachers from the neighboring math department gathered at the door, intrigued by the unfolding drama. Helen's lips trembled with rage. "Are you trying to kill me?" she cried. I didn't back down. "You seemed perfectly healthy when you hit me yesterday." I realized then that if I wanted to stay in school, I had to expose the truth. High school students usually have too much pride to show their struggles, but I wasn't the same person anymore. A nightmare decade had taught me that survival mattered more than dignity. I knelt in front of my grandmother and pulled up my sleeves, revealing the red welts on my arms. "You're forcing me to drop out so I can marry some old man for his money. You mean that 40-year-old Joe Miller who can't even feed himself? I won't do it. Please just let me stay in school. If I get into college, I promise I'll support this family." In my previous life I dropped out, was forced into marriage, and ran away after injuring Joe in self-defense. I stole an ID and fled to the city, where everyone assumed I was working in a factory. Only Sean Carter found me, delirious with fever, desperate for love. I believed his lies, worked double jobs to support him, and helped him get into South University. Why couldn't I go to college for myself? Supporting a selfish man had been pointless. This time I was determined to fulfill every dream I had abandoned, and make those who exploited me pay. The teachers, stunned by my story, hadn't expected me to be so pitiful. Mr. Harris, the teacher who had recommended me for special admission, stepped forward. Emily has been through so much, he said, helping me up. He glared at my grandmother. Mrs. Brown, our school provided $5,000 in financial aid for Emily to enroll. Now you want her to drop out. I had never heard about the $5,000 before. Helen shifted uncomfortably under the judgmental stares of the teachers. Girls grow up and get married anyway, she muttered. Isn't it better for them to have a husband who knows how to take care of them? Mr. Harris snapped. Joe Miller is 40 years old. Emily is only 16. What you're doing is illegal. Faced with mounting criticism, my grandmother finally relented. Fine. She won't drop out. But I'm not paying a single cent toward her tuition. I breathed a sigh of relief, until she grabbed my arm and pulled me aside. If you want to go to school, you figure it out yourself. Don't expect a single penny from this family. Her expression was fierce as she stormed off, leaving me standing there. Mr. Harris stepped protectively between us, watching her leave. But now I was alone, facing an office full of teachers. The principal, snapping out of his momentary sympathy, suddenly remembered something. Wait a minute, he said. She still owes tuition and fees. This isn't something we've dealt with before. If the debt isn't paid, it falls on the administration to sort it out. Mr. Harris, undeterred, spoke up. We'll waive whatever can be waived. I'll personally cover the rest. He patted my shoulder reassuringly. Then, turning to the principal, I asked, if I manage to get into Harvard, can the remaining fees be waived? The principal, who had been sipping water, nearly spat it out. Harvard? Are you serious? This school considers it a miracle if we get a single student into a top-tier university like MIT. And you're talking about Harvard? I wasn't able to study before because I didn't have time, I explained. But his skeptical look made it clear he didn't believe me. Fine, he said, shaking his head. Next week's final exams will tell the truth. Let's see your scores before you start making such bold claims. Even Mr. Harris seemed doubtful, though he tried to encourage me. Emily, don't stress about the fees. If you really feel guilty, you can repay me after you graduate. I nodded silently. I knew that proving myself would be the only way to change their minds. Go back to class and tidy up your things, Mr. Harris said with a gentle smile. When I entered the classroom, it was the middle of break, and the room was as lively as a marketplace. But as soon as I dragged the woven sack into the doorway, the noise stopped. Everyone stared at me like someone had pressed pause on a remote. I walked over to my old seat, only to find someone already sitting there. It was Dylan Reed, a boy who fancied himself the class comedian, though more like a cheap knockoff. His face twisted in annoyance as I approached. His desk was covered with tattered books, literally falling apart. Why are you back? He sneered. With your grades, you might as well drop out. You couldn't even get into a community college. I looked at him calmly. Move your stuff. Dylan clearly wasn't expecting me to talk back. His face turned red with anger. If you're dropping out, then do it already. Go get a job and save yourself the tuition. The room erupted in laughter. The humiliation of a former top 10 student like me seemed to bring them an extra dose of joy. I slammed my books onto the desk with a loud thud. At least I got into this school based on my grades. I shot back, my voice steady. Not like you who had to buy your way in. The room went silent. The first rule of fighting back against bullying is to aim for the leader. Dylan's face twisted in anger and nervousness. Everyone knew he had cheated his way through every test using his phone, but no one dared to say it out loud. Till now. I don't know what you're talking about, he sputtered, his voice rising. You're just mad because no one likes you. No wonder everyone says. Cut him off. Oh, so that's what they say about me. Interesting. My words hit their mark. Dylan was fuming, his face flushed. Before he could retort, the bell rang. Our English teacher, Mrs. Harper, nicknamed the Terminator, strode into the room. Her presence alone was enough to make everyone's heart sink. Her mood was clearly sour, and the class braced themselves for another one of her infamous rants. "It's bad enough that this class scores lower than the other sections on every test," she began, slapping a stack of papers onto her desk. "Some of you can barely scrape together a 40 on an exam that requires no more effort than throwing rice on a scantron and letting a chicken peck the answers. Today we're going to fix that. One mistake in the dictation, that's 100 points off." Her gaze swept the room. "Ooh," she barked, pointing randomly. "And you, come up to the board." Dylan, sensing an opportunity, raised his hand. "Mrs. Harper, Emily said she knows how to do it." Froze. His malicious grin spread across his face. It was obvious he wanted to embarrass me in front of everyone. "She said I could do it," he added, feigning innocence. That was hilarious. Had he forgotten what happened last time he tried writing on the board? Our English teacher, already annoyed with my poor grades, and now seeing my incomplete and unverified exam sheet, grew even angrier. "Emily Brown, if you mess up even one word, you'll write it out 200 times for me." Dylan chimed in, eager to add fuel to the fire. "Mrs. Harper, I want to try too." I glanced at Dylan and gave him a small smile. His face froze in surprise, clearly not expecting me, someone who usually kept quiet, to challenge the Terminator. Mrs. Harper, impatient, gestured for us to come to the board and begin the dictation. First I wrote slowly, deliberately. Dylan sneered, practically gloating. "If you can't do it, just admit it. Save us all the trouble." But soon his mocking stopped. The words got harder and I picked up speed. My memory was sharp, precise. Mrs. Harper raised an eyebrow and stepped closer to observe my writing. She stood silently next to me, clearly noticing that I hadn't made a single mistake. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Dylan frantically scribbling, trying to copy my words. An idea struck me. I began to write in elaborate, overly stylized English. "What the heck is this chicken scratch?" I heard him mutter, only making me smile wider. When the exercise ended, Mrs. Harper silently graded our work. She dismissed the groaning students and told me to follow her to the office. She looked like she had something to say but hesitated. I broke the silence first. "Mrs. Harper, I know my grades haven't been good," I said quietly. "It's because of family issues. Could you please give me another chance?" Before she could respond, a few other teachers who had gathered in the office chimed in on my behalf. Reluctantly, Mrs. Harper agreed, but with her usual sharp tone. "Fine, you can stay. But since you're here, you can help carry these assignments back to the classroom." Her voice softened slightly as she handed me the stack of papers. I turned to leave and noticed someone standing in the doorway. It was Brian White. Mrs. Harper gestured toward him, her voice now surprisingly gentle. "He's here to help you." Brian looked at me and said, "How did you end up like this? If you ever need help, just let me know. We were classmates after all." Hearing his calm, steady voice, I couldn't help but remember how he had once stood up for me in the cafeteria during one of the darkest times of my life. He had been one of the few bright spots in those bleak years. But now I quickly pushed those thoughts aside and nodded. "Thanks," I said, brushing past him. "But you're in the way." When I returned to the classroom, I found my book soaked with water. "It was you, wasn't it?" I asked, looking directly at Dylan, who was trying to look innocent. His guilty expression gave him away. "Got no proof," he muttered. "Don't go accusing people." I glanced around the room. The others either avoided my gaze or smirked at my misfortune. No one stepped up to help. Their indifference stung, but I knew I couldn't afford to waste my energy on petty revenge. Not right now. There would be time for that after the next exam. I dragged my woven sack to the back of the classroom and found an empty corner near the window. Sitting there was Brian White. Brian was known as the Scholar King. From the moment he joined this school, all anyone ever saw of him was the back of his head as he focused on his studies. Even our homeroom teacher, Mr. Gordon, was too scared to reprimand him, likely because his family had funded the construction of the school's teaching building. I remembered the kind boy who had defended me in the cafeteria, and wondered how he had become so distant. Most people avoided Brian, but there were no rumors of him being a bully. As I sat down, the noise of my movements seemed to catch his attention. To my surprise, Brian opened his eyes. His skin was pale, his pupils a light, almost transparent color, and his expression was utterly unreadable. Yet I could sense the words, "I don't care," radiating from him. "Do you mind if I sit here?" I asked hesitantly, but my hands were already moving to organize my things. His voice was low and calm, like a gentle stream. "You've already settled in before asking me." Smiled. "That's because I know you're a good person." Brian, still a teenage boy despite his aloof demeanor, turned slightly red at the ears. His voice, however, remained cold. "Don't disturb my sleep." When I glanced up, I noticed the shocked expressions of the girls sitting nearby. Their faces were filled with disbelief. "Oh my God, Brian didn't push her away," one whispered. "How can she sit next to the school's golden boy?" Whispers spread across the classroom. One girl muttered, "If it were that easy, I would have sat there myself." The commotion didn't bother me, until I saw Sean Carter enter the room. He hadn't been in class earlier. Where had he been? Preparing for the upcoming English competition, I realized. The school only had one spot, and he was the favorite to take it. I couldn't help but feel bitter. Why should this spot go to a guy like him? Later during dinner time, the classroom was mostly empty except for me and Sean. As soon as I walked in, he stood up and approached. "Are you okay? I can grab some food for you from the cafeteria," he offered. I stared at him steadily, my eyes unblinking. This was the moment in my previous life when Sean and I had begun to develop feelings for each other. Two lonely people, one an orphan, the other practically abandoned, had found solace in one another. I still remembered the way he had vowed to get into a good college to prove wrong all the people who looked down on him. I remembered how he cried when he decided to repeat a year of school. And of course, I would never forget the way he had emotionally manipulated me, forcing me into a divorce later in life. How much of his kindness back then had been genuine, and how much had been calculated? Before I could respond, a voice cut through the room. "Oh, look at you two. Broke as can be, pretending to date like you're in a romance movie." It was Lindsay Chun, drawing out her words dramatically to get a laugh from her little group of friends who had just entered the classroom. Lindsay, with her curled hair and delicate features, was notorious for being the class sleeping beauty. She could sleep through every lesson except homeroom. Now, holding her lunchbox, she smirked at me. "Bringing food is what dating looks like for you too." Without looking up from my books, I replied casually, "Why do you know so much? Are you dating someone yourself?" My tone was light, but my words hit a nerve. Everyone knew Lindsay spent her days exhausted because of her late-night gaming sessions. And after high school, she'd fallen into an online relationship that ended with her getting pregnant before even graduating college. Her face darkened. Clearly, she hadn't expected me to strike back. Furious, she stormed toward me, grabbing my books to throw them. I shoved her away without hesitation and looked coldly at Sean, who stood frozen nearby. He always valued his pride too much. Anytime things got messy, I was the one who had to deal with the fallout. He stayed clean while I got blamed. Lindsay's friends weren't about to let her lose face. They rushed over, scattering the contents of my woven sack everywhere. Enough! I kicked the desk aside and launched myself into the fray. Chaos erupted. Books and bags flew, and within moments, the five of us were hauled to the office by our homeroom teacher, Mr. Gordon. Mr. Gordon, a math teacher with a stiff gait that made me suspect he suffered from chronic hemorrhoids, slammed his hand on the desk. "What's the matter with you girls? Fighting like this? We're supposed to be a prestigious academic class." His frustration was palpable as he glared at us, clearly at a loss for how to handle the situation. "Don't you feel ashamed of yourselves? If you don't want to study, just go home." Mr. Gordon's voice boomed through the office, and I, standing closest to him, couldn't help but rub my ears. "And you, Emily Brown," he pointed at me. "You're the worst. I try not to criticize the girls too much, but your grades are terrible, your behavior is disgraceful, and you've caused the class to lose how many conduct points with your fights, tardiness, and early departures." He went on to explain rather loudly that those points affected his monthly bonus. "I'm only doing this because I need to make a living too," he added. "I was late just once," I muttered defensively. "And I admit that was my fault. But the fight wasn't started by me." "Save it," Mr. Gordon snapped, cutting me off. He wouldn't believe me, of course. After all, Lindsay Chan was his niece, and I was just the class troublemaker. Lindsay, who had stayed silent until now, suddenly raised her hand. "Mr. Gordon, Emily isn't just a bad student. She's been trying to seduce Sean Carter. I was confronting her about it. That's why she attacked me." Sean was one of the school's best prospects for getting into a top university, which meant he was directly tied to Mr. Gordon's bonus. The moment Lindsay said this, Mr. Gordon's anger flared. He picked up a book and threw it at me, though Mr. Harris quickly stepped in to block it. "Mr. Gordon," Mr. Harris said calmly, "accusations like seducing someone shouldn't be thrown around lightly. Shouldn't you ask Sean for his side of the story first?" Soon after, Sean was called into the office. Mr. Gordon's voice was sharp as he demanded, "Did Emily ask you to do something inappropriate?" This had never happened in my previous life. But I already knew exactly what Sean would say. True to form, he hesitated briefly before responding carefully, crafting his words to seem innocent. "Emily asked me to grab her some food from the cafeteria," he admitted. His face was pale, the same shade as his uniform. "I didn't mean anything by it." His explanation gained momentum as he spoke, trying to justify himself. "She also asked me some questions about homework." "What subject?" I cut him off abruptly. "English," he stammered, clearly caught off guard. I couldn't help but laugh. "You're telling me a former service worker, who could easily converse with foreigners, would ask you for help in English?" "Lying," I said firmly. "First, the food was for him, not me. Second, I've never asked him for help in English. My scores might not be the best, but I don't need his help. I refuse to let anyone smear my reputation without fighting back." Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Lindsay and her friends growing visibly nervous. "You, with a score of 25 in English, dare to say you're better than Sean?" Mr. Gordon grabbed the grade sheet and flung it at me. The bold 25 glared back at me in black ink. I stared at it, then lifted my head. "Fine," I said, my voice steady. "Wait for the finals. See for yourself." "Anyone can talk big," Mr. Gordon sneered. "If your English score doesn't meet the standard, you won't stay in this class. You'll be sent to the regular track." A challenge had been laid down, and I had no choice but to take it. Looking at the pristine English textbooks on my desk, my heart wavered. It had been so long since I studied properly. Could I really pull this off? As I tapped my foot anxiously, Brian White, sitting beside me, frowned slightly. "Can you stop moving?" "Sorry," I said sheepishly. Then, quickly following up, "Since you're already annoyed, can I borrow your study materials?" Brian didn't respond, but he pushed a set of books toward me. The textbooks were immaculate, like they'd been prepared to sell to the next batch of students. I opened one, flipping to the table of contents. The modules were neatly divided. The purple sections for second-round review for seniors, the red sections for first review. Each module included multiple-choice questions, reading comprehension, and task-based reading exercises. "Are you actually reviewing or just flipping through books?" Lindsay's mocking voice rang out from across the room. Others, noticing how quickly I was turning pages, joined in the laughter. "Is this the legendary quantum reading method?" Someone joked. "She's reading a book in 25 seconds flat. I think 20.50 suits you better," someone mocked. But I ignored it, focusing on the book in front of me. In English, vocabulary is king. During my time working as a waitress to earn extra money, I had picked up conversational fluency in 2 languages. While I might not be great with grammar, my vocabulary was decent. Everyone knows that English comprehension is a bit like a guessing game. If Sean Carter had claimed I asked him for help with math, I might have been at a loss. But English? Not likely. As I was lost in thought, Brian White suddenly kicked the table lightly, silencing the room. "Can you all shut up?" he said, his voice cold and cutting. Lindsay, who had been sneering at me, froze, like a duck whose neck had been squeezed. Her face turned red with embarrassment. Being rebuked by the class's golden boy wasn't something she could brush off. Fighting back tears, she ran out of the room, presumably to complain to the homeroom teacher. I let out a quiet laugh. Did she really think the teacher would confront Brian over her? Brian suddenly broke the silence. "I thought you didn't have a problem with me," he said, his voice calm but probing. "Do you think I'm some kind of bully?" His perceptiveness caught me off guard. I quickly shook my head. "Of course not." Mrs. Harper handed back our dictation papers in silence. When Dylan saw his score, riddled with errors copied from my deliberately messy script, he turned pale. Mine, on the other hand, was perfect. Not a single mistake. She didn't praise me, but the way she glanced at me, just for a second, held something new. Respect. The next few days were a blur of quiet determination. I studied like my life depended on it because this time it did. Brian didn't say much, but he didn't have to. His books became my lifeline. His silence a kind of protection. Every time someone muttered something under their breath, a cold glare from him was enough to shut them down. Even Mr. Gordon started watching me more closely, like he was waiting for me to crack. Then came the final exams. When the results were posted, the entire school stopped to look. Emily Brown. 1 ST place in English. 2 ND place overall in the grade. Not only had I crushed the English competition, but I'd also outscored Sean Carter by 38 points. The classroom erupted. Some were in disbelief. Others, like Lindsay, looked like they'd seen a ghost. Sean just sat there, frozen, the color draining from his face. He had spent weeks preparing for that contest, and now the one person he'd once pitied had taken it all. Mr. Gordon stormed into the office, demanding a recount. But the papers didn't lie. And then came the announcement no one expected. Harvard's early admissions list was released, and my name was on it. Full scholarship. All fees waived. When I walked into the principal's office to confirm it, the same man who had once sneered at my worn uniform now stood up and shook my hand. "Emily, we're proud of you," he said, though his voice wavered with embarrassment. I smiled, but I didn't say a word. That evening I stood at the school gates, my woven sack replaced with a sleek backpack. Brian appeared beside me, hands in his pockets. "You're really leaving?" he asked. "I have to," I said. "Not just for me. For the girl I was, the one who stayed behind while everyone else moved forward." He nodded slowly. "You know, I always knew you were different. Even when no one else saw it." I looked at him, really looked. "You saw me when I was invisible. Thank you." He didn't reply, just gave a small, rare smile before turning to walk away. But as I turned to leave, a voice called out, "Emily!" Turn. Sean stood there, alone, his hands trembling slightly. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he said, voice cracking. "For everything. I didn't realize." "You don't have to say anything," I interrupted gently. "I already know the truth. You never loved me. You just needed someone to carry you." He flinched. "And that's okay," I added. "Because I carried you once. But now, I'm carrying myself." I walked away without looking back. Months later, a letter arrived. Sean had dropped out of university. Lindsay had dropped out of college, pregnant and alone. My grandmother tried to contact me, begging for money, claiming they were in debt. I sent a single check, not for her but to the social services office with a note, for the protection of minors in the Brown household. I never looked back. I graduated from Harvard with honors. Became a human rights lawyer. Specialized in cases involving forced marriage and educational rights for girls. And one day, as I stood in a courtroom defending a young girl fighting to stay in school against her family's wishes, I looked into her eyes and saw myself, 15 years old, broken but refusing to stay down. After the verdict was read, asterisk in favor of the plaintiff asterisk, she whispered, "How did you know it was possible?" Smiled. Because I was her. The camera pans out. A new chapter begins. Not with revenge. Not with bitterness. But with quiet, unshakable strength. And this time I wasn't a burden. I was the storm,